Hi everybody, welcome to this webinar where we'll be introducing Devio SCX. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us today. Well, for those that don't know me, let me introduce myself. I'm Jason Spooner, I'm a technical support specialist and I'm based in the UK, normally out of our London office, currently working from home like many of us are, hoping to be back into the office shortly. I work in post-sales technical support. I joined Biamp at the beginning of 2020. And I've been supporting Biamp products for over 5 years. The agenda for today is we've got not too many slides, and we're going to get through them as quickly as possible because we want to leave some time for Q&A at the end and for a demonstration. As I mentioned, Ian is monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to put them in there at any time. We'll either answer them at the time, or if they need a longer explanation, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So to start off with, let's have a look at where Devio SCX fits into the ecosystem. And really, Devio SCX is all about bringing the automated power of Devio into larger conference rooms. And to get a sense of what we mean by that, we really need to look at where Devio as a platform has come from and where it's going. So you see the Devio SCR series, which was the first generation Devio. I should point out now that SCR is not going anywhere. It's a current product. It's not being replaced by SCX, just we're adding to the platform with a new product. And it remains really useful for small meeting rooms, huddle rooms, and private offices. And it excels in a bring your own device or with an installed UC device in the room. It supports up to 2 Devio mics. That's the Devio specific ones, the DCM1 and the DTM1. Or we can also have one parlay microphone. That's the TCM XEX or the TTM XEX, the ceiling and table options respectively. And we can output to the room via the integrated 20-watt amp or via HDMI outputs to the display loudspeakers or an RCA output. It works well in these spaces because we can host a meeting with a single cable AV solution. So just a USB cable will give you access to the high quality audio system, to a webcam through the USB hub, and we can also output to a display using USB video or via HDMI. And Devio SCR, or in fact CR1, was the first iteration of our automated room tuning. And where Devio SCX builds on this is we can scale this up to larger spaces. And we're now compatible with up to 8 parlay microphones and 8 amplifier channels, XUBT, USB extension, and the HT1 dialer. They come in 2 models, otherwise they are identical except for the 400 has 4 AEC channels and the 800 has 8. We also allow for an all-cat cable installation, so from microphone to loudspeaker, everything can be connected with RJ45s for really quick and easy installation. We do remove the video function from the device and the USB hub, as the spaces that we're expecting Devio to be deployed in would likely have a presentation switch or other means to support this. And we also add our next generation VoIP interface into the box itself, so we can actually use Devio to make calls. And so this is SCR's home really, a laptop or indeed an installed NUC PC or UC room system connected by USB, the single parlay microphone, and access to the room webcam through USB on the rear hub, and out to Disono loudspeakers from the amp. We can also output our presentation or our screen to the room display. And where we take that with the SCX series is we remove the connected peripherals from Devio itself, and we go to a solution where we can add more microphones, more loudspeakers. This can be, an installed UC system or bring your own device laptop. and we don't even need to use USB. If we don't want to, we can add Modena to the solution and have access to the conference system completely wirelessly. And because we can support more amplifiers and more microphones, we can scale this up to much larger systems. And there's a very quick overview of the features. As I mentioned, there's two models, both are identical except for the number of AEC channels. Devio uses Biamp launch for automated discovery and tuning of the system. We've got built-in USB for audio and HID support for mute sync, AEC offload, etc. Up to 8 parlay mics, and we can monitor the device via Sage View as well. Devio works only with Biamp connected peripherals. And you may wonder, with the introduction of SCX and the new Tesira Forte X, what is the difference? They look very similar. They are a shared brain, as it were. And the differences are really that Devio is an automated but closed system. So we have a fixed signal path suited for conferencing applications. It's an automated, simple and reproducible setup. So if you're deploying Devio into a number of rooms, similar rooms or identical rooms for an enterprise customer, you can know that the installation will always be the same and the performance will always be the same for all those different rooms. They're designed as room-based systems with centralized monitoring. So you can have a number of Devios on the network visible. You can administer them and monitor them centrally, but the actual systems themselves are really designed to be islands, so all the connected devices will be in their own cluster. And it works well in all size spaces, and we can give a really consistent experience through very small meeting rooms right the way up to large boardrooms. And we've got a 1x1 USB speakerphone built into the device. So Tesira, and specifically Tesira Forte X, really offers everything that the Devio can do, but adds the option to customize. It can be tailored to any environment, and that's via our general purpose programming platform. Tesira Forte X is a Tesira, so it can be programmed in the way that you're used to with rack mount Tesira Forte and Tesira server DSPs. Because of that, it's scalable into much larger system deployments. The Forte X also adds Dante to the media ports as well, analog I/O, 2 in 2 out, and GPIO. It has the same 1x1 USB when you're using it in launch mode, or if you're configuring it manually, you've got 2x2 USB audio. The big question is, what can we use Devio SCX with? Well, it's compatible with most modern operating systems. It's it's a class compliant USB audio device, and it'll work with all popular UC room systems. And we offer mute sync with Microsoft Teams and Zoom clients. Very popular at the moment are obviously Microsoft Teams rooms and Zoom room systems, and installed all in one device, offering those platforms. Currently, we're going through the certification process for both of those vendors. It's not just us. The product has the functionality built in, but we need to be whitelisted. Now we work perfectly for audio with them, but once we complete the certification, we can offer mute synchronization and AEC offload, and that will be built in and automatic when the device is connected. We can actually make SCX HID compatible with those systems now. All we need to do is add an XUBT, let Biamp launch configure it automatically, and it'll all be available to you. And just a brief look at the hardware itself. So we've got a really nice industrial design for the box. On the front of the device, we've got status LEDs, so you can see power status. You can see information on the connected ports that they're passing PoE, and we have devices connected to them. We've got the locking power connector because we've got an external power supply, Devio. When these are mounted not necessarily in a rack room as a traditional DSP might be, we need the locking power connector to prevent accidental power offs. And when you receive Devio SCX, you'll find it in the box with the surface mounting plate already attached, so that it can be removed just by 4 screws. But this allows it to be mounted behind flat panel displays, underneath desks, onto walls. So it's not restricted to being in a rack cabinet. You can have 2 of them on a rack shelf. You need to leave 1 centimeter between them for airflow. And the mounting plate is a really nice design because we have these cable management ports. So we give you a really nice entry to the cables with the perfect entry to the device. So you've got cables will be managed well, and we've got strain relief. I have a little clip that clips the cables in, but if you're using a cable that doesn't fit the clip, you can use zip ties as well. If we move on to what we can actually use as peripherals with SCX, it supports all of the Parlay family beam tracking microphones. So the TCM1 pendant, the TCMX flush mount ceiling mic, and the TTMX table microphone. We also support the daisy chaining function, so you can have 3 TCM1s and 2 of the X series mics on a single cable run. Each of the mics require only 1 channel of AAC processing. And at the output stage, we can support 4 models of amplifiers. So we've got the amp only 450p and 450bp. So 4 channels, 4 or 8 ohms, up to 50 watt in burst mode. We've got the amplifiers integrated in the A series of the Parlay mics as well, which are 2 channels, 4 or 8 ohms, up to 40 watts burst mode. For the 450bp, that can be mounted on the rear of the Sono loudspeaker or onto the plenum boxes of the microphones themselves. You'll see it's got RJ45s to connect to the Sono loudspeakers, and the 450p has Phoenix connectors. You can also use the Biamp CCA cable to convert either of those to RJ45 or to Phoenix, respectively. And it's worth noting now that Biamp launch has been designed around the Sono CIC6 loudspeakers, and these are perfectly designed for conference room applications. They're 8 ohm nominal with a 130-degree dispersion, so you can drive 2 loudspeakers in parallel off of any of the supported amplifier channels. And the wide coverage allows you to have a really even output, even when you've got a relatively low ceiling in the conference room. And now that we support VoIP directly on Devio itself, the means to control it is the Biamp HD1. Now, of course, you will need to configure the VoIP lines manually. We can't let launch do that for us. But once that's done, Biamp launch will automatically discover and program the HD1 so it will be ready to make calls. Microphone mute is propagated to the LEDs, so when you use the buttons on the HD1 itself, and the volume control will control the call level into the room. Although SCX does have a built-in USB interface, we also offer the option to add the XUBT. Now, there are a couple of reasons that you may want to do this. We support Bluetooth functionality, so a user can come into the conference room and bridge their own personal device, like a phone or tablet or whatever, into the conference system. It is Teams rooms and Zoom rooms certified, as we mentioned earlier. A scenario may be that you can have the installed device, like the room system, connected to the built-in USB on SCX, and you may wish to add a convenient USB connection to the table location for users to bring in their own laptop or or anything else to use the conference system. So it can be used at the same time. It can be used in place of or concurrently with the built-in USB interface. We do offer Devio in a number of meeting room bundle options, so medium and large meeting rooms, which include respective numbers of parlay mics and loudspeakers and amplifiers. There is a link in the handout. You can check out the room bundles on our website. So now we know what it works with, we can look at how we can actually design conference rooms around the SCX. And we've got a number of tools which many of you will have seen before to do so. So we've got the parlay microphone, the loudspeaker, and the amplifier power calculators. These are really quick and efficient means to begin designing a room or validate existing designs. But the complete solution is offered using the conference room designer. So this will deliver the whole package, microphones, DSP, loudspeakers, and it will give you a full bill of materials of what you need to get the conference room up and running. It also delivers customer-facing documentation, so you can show your customers what hardware they need, how it's connected, and how it will perform. And I'd like to very quickly just show you the conference room designer and see how this all works. If I grab a browser now, it's available through Cornerstone, support.biamp.com, and it's in our design tools library. And we can start building a conference room. So let's do a demo. All right, so this is going to be a boardroom, and we'll switch it to meters. Let's do a reasonable size room, 12 by 8 with 2.7 meters ceiling height. And we can add the European standard for ceiling tiles. Let's do a rectangular table, and again of a reasonable size. Oops. Great, and so we can start configuring the devices we want. We can change this at any time. We can make amendments to the project throughout. I'm just going to do the flush mount TCM-X microphones, and I'm going to cover the full room to begin with. Hopefully I've got data on the acoustics of my room, so the reverberation time and the ambient noise floor. I'm going to go for a good setting. There is a link to what these settings mean here, so you can make judgments on the actual acoustics of your room based on the data obtained from a site survey. And in this case, we're going to look at a Devio solution. So we could make a system with Devio or Tessera. And that's it. We get an instant output. So we're covering the full room. Looks like we've got 6 microphones and 15 loudspeakers. So we can see the distance from nearest mic for all these participants. We can also measure the distance, and we can look at the loudspeakers, where they're located and their relative average level. So you can see this is going to be a nice even coverage for this room. And we get an output of the equipment list, so we know what we need to build this conference system. So an 800 to cover the 6 AAC channels that we need. The microphones, we're going to use a combination of the amplifier and the amplified outputs of the parlay mics. A Tessera Connect to connect the additional peripherals that can't be supported by the 4 PoE plus AVB ports on the device itself. And we also get information on the category cable that we need to put it all together. And if we're happy with that, we can just request a quote straight away. So just put in our details, and someone from the sales team will get back to you. but we might want to make some amendments. So if we take a look at the microphones again, let's say we don't want to cover the room, we want to cover just the boardroom table. And we'll do the same for the loudspeakers. You'll see that the equipment list is automatically updated for us. You can also start using these tools, which are new in the version 2 of the conference room designer. As I said before, we can start measuring the distances to the nearest microphone. We can also use this little tool here, and we can get an audio example of what that microphone will sound like at a given distance. So we can click anywhere in the layout and hear what those microphones should sound like. And the customization it really comes into play here with this version. So we can start moving microphones around if we want to. And we can even add in additional microphones here. Let's say this is how I want to do it. It's nice. And my equipment list will be updated. So if I'm happy with that, I can do a number of things. So I could request a quote as before. I can save this project. So I'll get a URL, a custom URL here. I can share this with my colleagues or customers. And the design will always be stored, so you can come back to it and make amendments to it and review the design that you made earlier. We can also export the project. So this is where we generate that customer-facing documentation. And once it loads, the output we get will be a nicely formatted PDF with the details of the design engineer, the room details, project name, and we'll get the room acoustics listed there. We'll show the microphone coverage with distances and also where the microphones will be installed, so their actual position within the room. The same goes for the loudspeakers, so we can see their relative average level, the dispersion, and also where the speakers need to be installed. And we get an equipment list with links to those solutions. And you'll see in this scenario, the best way to do this is to use one of the meeting room bundles and then put additional microphones on top of it. Oh, and there we are, we have something we can share with our customers.
Sorry, Jason, just a couple of questions whilst you're on Room Designer, if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it.
That'd be great. It's just that they've come in and I think they're relevant. So Laurentiu is asking, in the conference room designer, there's no possibility for a U-shaped conference table. Is that something we're going to offer maybe at the future? Do you know?
I don't know if we are definitely going to offer it, but I can certainly tell you that it has been a frequent request. Yeah, it's the way to do it now is, I guess, manually. You can use the parlay table and ceiling calculators, and you just have to stitch things together. But yeah, at the moment there is no U-shaped table, but the request is noted, and I will add this to the submitted request. So let's see if we can offer that in the future.
Excellent, thanks for that. And if you've still got the room designer open, David is also asking, what if there's a ceiling tile which is already used by something else? So yeah, I think you can block those out. That's a good question.
That is a really good question. So let's see if I can get this right. So let's say there is a microphone here, and if I go to the ceiling, I can actually, I might have some ceiling services all around here. When I go back to the mics, you'll see that we should be moving this microphone out. Perhaps I haven't updated it properly. I know why. It's because I've got a custom design, so I've manually moved microphones around myself, so it's going to ignore anything I do there. But that's how you do it. you can block off ceiling tiles, and that's why we allow ceiling tiles in there. If you go, you can start changing the coverage density, and it'll actually reset any custom locations that you've added, and you'll get a warning before you do so. But yeah, that's how you do it.
Yeah, and also just to mention, if the tiles in your room don't look exactly like this, for example, if the center of a tile is centered over the table, you can also move the edge of the tiles so that it looks more like the real installation, if you like, or the real project. So
Exactly.
but those are fine-tuning matters which can be done. We've got a couple of detailed webinar recordings on YouTube about exactly this subject, so it might be good to look at those for more detail on that.
Yeah, otherwise we could talk about the conference room designer all day. Are any more questions on it for now?
Yes, there's one from Marsban. Why does the room designer always show the microphones off center on the table? I think I can answer that, and that's because in this case the ceiling tiles are not centralized over the table, so therefore they're using the center of a tile to be mounted. So if your ceiling tiles are indeed centralized over the center of the table, then the microphones will move accordingly into that position. So that's just a matter. I think, again, recommend looking at the room designer webinar recordings and for full details. So Jason can move on to the SCX at the moment.
Perfect. All right, thanks for the questions, and thanks, Ian. So go back to the presentation and talk about the good stuff. So Biamp launch, and we'll see how we can automate room setup with SCX. I'll say, unfortunately, we don't have the means or the time to do a live demonstration at the moment, but there is, in the handout, there is a link to a demonstration from my colleague. So we'll just run through how the system works without actually seeing it and hearing it in action today. And it starts with a press of a button. So if a system's never been launched before, press the button once and you'll get an audio prompt saying we're going to begin Biamp launch. If a system has been through the launch process previously, you press it once and then you'll get a prompt to press it again to make sure that you don't accidentally start a launch process when you don't really want to. Our launch will begin by discovering and programming all of the connected Biamp devices. And once we've done that, we can begin measuring the acoustics of the room. So what we do is we put the parlay microphones into a special test mode where they become omnidirectional. And we start sending test tones out into the room through the connected loudspeakers. Now, the beauty of launch is because it's using Biamp hardware and Biamp processing, we know how these devices should perform. We send out the tones, we can measure the RT60, the noise floor, we can measure the relative distance between loudspeakers and microphones. We can also measure the sensitivity of connected loudspeakers, so we can adjust the output level accordingly. So once we have done those measurements, we can compare them with the target values that we know. And then the system will automatically in the background tune the system for optimal performance. So the DSP will be configured for you. And it takes a couple of minutes to complete. It varies very slightly depending on how many devices are connected, but yeah, it's a couple of minutes to get through the process and it's done. And throughout, audio prompts advise you on the progress. So you're told to be quiet during the testing phase, etc. And in a way, it's special, but nothing new is new under the sun. We're using Biamp processing that you already know, and we're just adding this new automation capability. And once everything's configured, we get a performance report, which we'll have a look at in a moment. And just to give you a sense of what launch is doing once it's discovered and programmed the devices, the routing is very basically like this. Microphones are routed to the far end destinations. Far end sources are routed to the loudspeakers and to the AEC reference, so we can hear those in the room, and there'll be echo cancel. Calls are bridged between endpoints, so it is perfectly acceptable to do a SIP call and a USB UC call at the same time. So in that scenario, the USB would be routed to the loudspeakers so you can hear it, and it would be routed to the VoIP transmit as well. So those on the SIP call would be able to hear all endpoints on the call, and the same, if you're in a SIP call, that would be routed to the loudspeakers and also to any other destinations. So once everything's done, set up and configured, we get the Biamp launch report card. So this isn't just available, directly after launch. It can be accessed at any time. And first, it shows the initial performance of the room. So, once we tested the acoustic environment, we know how the loudspeakers were performing. We know how long the decay time was and the noise floor. And then we get the optimized performance output. So this is once we've done those measurements and applied the settings to deal with any audio issues found with the acoustic space. So those settings can be applied, and we get an output of how the room should perform now. We also get an overview of all the connected devices. So this is quite a useful tool if you were doing lots and lots of conference rooms in a big rollout. You have lots of devices and you need to document what's installed in each room. So the report card will give you the models, serial numbers and firmware versions of all those devices for prosperity. And it's always available via the web UI that's hosted in the device, or it will be available through SageView. And if you do want to access the launch report card and any additional configuration options, this is how we do it. So we don't have a front panel display like you're used to on Tessera DSPs, for example. So how do we find its IP address? Well, we have a tool to do so. And I'll mention the QR code since we got it there. When you get SCX out of the box, you are given QR codes, so you can just scan them and it'll take you to all of the documentation, how to install it, how it all goes together, and it'll also take you to the Biamp discovery tool. And it's a very, very simple application which will discover any connected Devio SCXs and Tessera ForteXs as well in the local network. It doesn't discover over remote subnets, as you can imagine. So when out of the box, you connect your PC to the control port. It's set for DHCP, so if your PC is as well, you'll discover them in the local subnet. And you can launch the web user interface directly from the Biamp discovery tool. And this is how networking works on SCX. So we've got dedicated control and separate AVB ports. So port 1 is there for control and monitoring via the web user interface and SageView. VoIP is also shared on that same interface. Now it can have the same IP address as the control port, or you can put it into a separate VLAN and then it will need its own unique IP address. It means you'll have one port connected to the customer's network, but you can have control and VoIP logically separated. And then ports 2 to 5 are PoE plus AVB capable ports for connecting Biamp expanders. PoE is we can deliver the max budget, when all ports are connected. You can also use TT5 or TT5D to extend the network. TT5D works fine, but obviously you can't leverage the Dante capabilities built into that device, but it will work as a standard AVB switch in that scenario. I should also mention that you can use any Avenue certified AVB switch as well. You don't have to use TT5D or TT5. And we also have added VoIP to Devio, and we are adding the next generation of VoIP interfaces to our systems. It is a software-based VoIP phone, whereas the existing VoIP interface endpoints are run on dedicated hardware. It's one line with two call appearances, so you can have a three-way conference. We add some features. There's security features with TLS, RTP security. We also support ICE, which is something that we haven't done before for a network discovery for remote endpoints. We also have logging directly within the device, and I'll show you that in a moment. And a fun one is a choice of ringtones, or you can add your own. And that's just a WAV file. So let's actually have a bit of a tour. So if I open, sorry, do bear with me. Biamp discovery, and you'll see that it's discovered the SCX straight away. I have manually set a static IP on this device, so I could play around with the VoIP interface, and I can just launch the web user interface directly from there. And come onto a different screen. There is a password set from the factory. It could be changed, and it's recommended that it's changed on a corporate network. The default username is admin, and the password will be the serial number of the unit itself, which is obviously visible in well, physically on the device or through the Biamp discovery tool. And I wasn't paying attention when I was typing it. And there we have it. So it looks very similar to SageView in terms of layout. So you're greeted with the device page. So you'll see the Devio DSP at the top. You can add your device description here. You'll see the firmware version, serial number, and you can also do the locate function. So at the moment, all of the LEDs are flashing on the front of the unit, so I can determine which one is which. You'll also see the connected and configured peripherals. So we'll discover things and give you the green tick when everything is ready to use in the system. So obviously this one has, I've done the launch process already on here. We can do audible locate for the loudspeaker channels, and you can adjust the level. And then the audio configuration page. So we can do launch from the button, or we can even do it from here as well. The target SBL is what you're intending for launch to aim for as the output into the room at listener height. So we do test and determine the relative distance between microphones and loudspeakers, but of course we can't judge where a listener may be. So we use a standard listener ear height. So that's the target SPL that we're aiming for. Usually in a conference room, something between 60 and 65 is ideal. So in this scenario, I've got 10 dB above that. If I was using Windows to run Teams on or something like that, 50% on the volume slider would be 10 dB off of that. So I'd have a good comfortable level with some adjustment directly from my PC. We can change the UC vendor as well. So what this does is it reconfigures some of the DSP parameters to perfectly suit these different vendors. So Teams, Meet, and Zoom will have, you know, a different codec or different requirements for the certification for how the DSP should be configured. If you're not using any of those, or using different vendors all the time, you can select generic, and it will do the, you know, sort of middle of the road settings to give a good performance across all of them. You can change this in runtime. So if I was at Teams, if I wanted to change it to Zoom, I don't need to run launch again. That will be applied automatically. And this is where I can get the report card. Just wait for that to update. So this was the analysis of my room in the beginning. So the speakers were okay in their situation. The room reverb wasn't too bad, and the room noise was, again, somewhere in the middle. And this is the post launch configuration. So this should be a good sounding system since the launch process had been completed. And there's the device list. So I can download this as a PDF as well for documentation purposes. We see we've got audio meters for all of the connected devices. So we get status of when we're connected and streaming, muted. I know that my VoIP line is ready. I can't actually make a call because I haven't got a HD1 connected at the moment. But I'm using the built-in USB, and I've also got an XUBT here as well. Change the device name. So this is what will show up in the operating system or on the UC device. So that's what the user will see. Could do the same for the Bluetooth interface on XUBT. So that's what will be there on their phone when they go to discover it. Or I can disable Bluetooth discovery from here as well. Won't dwell on the network too much, but as I mentioned, I am using a static IP here. So in this case, the VoIP is not relevant because I haven't put it in a separate VLAN. So I'm sharing the same IP address for the VoIP line and the control interface. And we've also got support for network device validation via 802.1x. Going to settings, I can do a device reboot remotely, sync the clock, which is working well. Firmware updates are administered through the web user interface. You can actually also update Devio SCX via Tessera software. We use the same TFA type files. Firmware updates in the web UI are actually really nice because you get a countdown telling you how long it's going to be until it's finished the update and ready to go. I've only done a couple on this one since I've had it, and they've been between 5 and 8 minutes. And of course, you can update the security here. And a quick tour of VoIP. So I am registered at the moment. I haven't got any call statistics because I'm not in a call. And there's a maintenance section here, so I can force a re-register before the timer is up. You can also retrieve logs. So let's get some. Let's see what we get. Let's get that out of the way. On me. Might not be too easy to see, but if you're having issues registering with the proxy, obviously Wireshark is always the best tool to get really detailed information. But you'll see we get some good information directly from the device itself. So let's find. Obviously, this has been running for some time. I probably should have cleared these logs. Can I find the last time it registered? Okay, yeah, so send a register, and then we get a 404 unauthorized wrong credentials, another register. So yeah, you can actually see what the interface is doing, and we're also seeing the responses. So it's not just here's us sending register requests. We can also see the OK messages here. So this is coming back from the proxy. So we're all good and registered and ready to make a call. They're not real time, but you can download them at any time. And then the setup is always done. So VoIP line setup is always performed via the web UI. I just used the standard view but of course there's advanced features available here. Once you've made your amendments, you just save your changes. Cool features as you accept, local DTMF, cool progress tone levels, and you can change your ringtone here. Everything you would expect. So obviously ICE is the new addition to getting these devices out of the local network and onto the public internet. And we can select our codecs. We also have added support for the Opus codec. So this is something that we do expect to become more popular in the coming years. So Opus allows a much wider bandwidth call, so much higher quality audio than even G722. Obviously G711 is what is kind of commonly used, which pretty much sounds like an analog phone line. 722 and the Opus codec, much wider band, higher quality audio. There is an event scheduler. This is probably not less relevant for Devio SCX, as we can't make our own presets and things. You can add events, so it could be scheduling meetings. You can also put the device into day and night mode, so you could turn the LEDs on and off. And we've got a troubleshooting section here, so we can download device logs, and anyone who's used Desira before will recognize these. We get a full log, time stamped with what's been going on. You know, how to reboot, and all of the AVB streams were created, and then we'll see that my VoIP line is registered. So yeah, get all of those for troubleshooting directly from there. That's basically it. I know that was a very quick run through because I wanted to allow some time for questions, and it looks like we've got just under 15 minutes left. So if we come away from that for a moment, and Ian, I don't know if we've got any questions coming up that you want me to address now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a good few questions in, but I encourage people to ask any other questions if they've got them at this time. A couple of questions from Marsban and Anish regarding voice lift in large rooms. So I am pretty sure we don't support voice lift in Devio SCX, but maybe you could cover how we could support it with Desira, maybe.
That's correct. So Devio SCX is a fixed architecture. Microphones will never be routed to the loudspeakers. If you do want to do that, you can do that with any of the Desira DSPs, Forte X, rack mount Forte, and Desira server. So yeah, in SCX, it's always going to be a fixed architecture, standard conference room system. So we can't do voice lift with Devio. But yeah, certainly you could do that with any of the Desira devices.
Great, thanks for that answer. Anish also asks, can we see the processing which is done after the launch process and then make further changes manually?
You can't. So at this time, I don't know what the future holds. But at this time, there you can't see what processing's been applied. Launch does its thing and does everything for you, and then it's very much locked down. You have to trust Launch to do its job, which it does, and we found that it's very consistent. You can run the launch process multiple times and you'll always get the same result. You also find that you can move loudspeakers around, connect different loudspeakers, and you do get a very consistent result, but you don't get any chance to make any changes to the audio settings within Devio. If you do want to do that, then you go to the Desira platform and custom program that.
Great, thanks for that answer. And then the final question at the moment is from David. and I think it's just a general comment regarding Devio SCX not having video, and therefore it feels like it's a retrograde step or a backward step when compared to the previous version. I wonder if you could explain maybe the differences between the two and why you would use one over the other.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. The reason being is that we obviously still offer SCR, and in the rooms where that is ideally designed for, it may be the center of that space. So as we mentioned, using the hub and the video aspect, we give customers a single cable to have access to that whole conference room system, because it might be space or budget requirements, but all of the budget may be going into that to have that system, as a whole. With Devio SCX, if you need those features and you're in the realms of the size of space that SCR can be used in, then go for SCR. That's absolutely fine. It still sounds excellent. It's still automated and offers all those additional features that you want. But where SCX is taking the Devio platform is into those larger spaces, where budget constraints might not be as tight. When you're going into those rooms, we're not expecting to have this single hub in the middle of it. We would expect there to be, video devices and external webcams and presentation switches. So really, Devio can go into a more integrated system rather than being the small basic integrated system that SCR intends to be. It's a good point. And I can sort of see how on the surface it might see that it's a retrograde going to SCX in that sense. But really, we're massively upgrading the audio capabilities and focusing on audio with the product.
Great, thank you. And another question is coming from Mosban. An interesting question, and I'm curious about your answer because I don't know it. If after doing the launch process, we still get a poor score for the room, what could be done after that to correct it? I don't know if you've experienced that at all.
Yeah, well, I've not been able to experience it myself in the times that I've used launch, but that's actually a really good point. So thanks for bringing this up. Launch is actually not only a really good tool for configuring these things, but it's also a great tool for assessing your actual acoustic environment. There can be circumstances where the conference room is just not suitable for this type of audio system. So if you do end up with a result where it's still poor, it means that the acoustic environment is just not friendly enough for an audio system of this type. There is, if you end up with that result, unfortunately there's nothing you can do to try and tweak it. Even if we gave you the options to tweak settings within SCX, if the room is poor, then you could never process around poor acoustics, unfortunately. So if you do get that poor result, then perhaps the system has been deployed into an environment that wasn't suitable in the first place. And that's why I kind of showed you the conference room designer and the acoustic settings. We really do recommend that site surveys are done, and to get those two measurements of reverberation time and ambient noise floor, so systems can be planned. SCX and 40X and in fact all parlay systems can be used in rooms that are relatively hard to work with, but of course they have to be designed with the the right distance from microphone to the participant speaking. Yeah, hopefully that answers it. Unfortunately, there's no processing around the room that is just too poor.
Great, thanks for that answer. And that's all the questions for now. So Thank you very much for everybody for your time, and Jason, so I'll leave it up to you to wrap up.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for all the questions and for taking the time to view the presentation this morning. If you do have any follow-up questions, please feel free to email me directly. If there's anything missed or anything that we think that needs clarifying, we'll send those out to you. Please do feel free to download the handout from GoToWebinar. I think you'll get an email as well as a follow-up. So as long as there are no more questions, I'll say thanks very much for attending, and enjoy the rest of your days.